some would dare call me a silly goose, perhaps? That's good one. So, your town is not too small for good public transit. I assure you, say it with me, your town is not too small for good public transit. Are we still trying to manifest things in 2025? I love the website Linny Plus because sometimes it's nice to know, oh damn, maybe I'm not the only person who wants a tram line in Stade. It feels nice not to be crazy. By the way, if anyone from the city of Stade is watching, hi. Your recent bus schedule improvements were very well appreciated. Next up, consider this tram proposal that paralleled the 2007 bus line, or at least a tourist tram that maybe goes from the Bahnhof and circles around the historic Altstadt. I just think it'd be neat. I've mentioned this proposal from Laurel and Linny Plus a few times in different Discord servers and transit discussions, and people say, Jamie, you stupid foamer! Stade is a town of only 47,000 people. Why the hell do you want a tram? That's way too small for a tram line, or even a network, or more than hourly bus service after 9 p.m. Even the translated first line of Laurel's Linny Plus proposal for Stade is, a tram for a city of less than 50,000 inhabitants sounds pretty absurd at first. But what if I told you that wasn't absurd at all? In fact, there are other smaller towns in Germany that do in fact have tram networks, and I think towns around the world could maybe learn something from them. Wacha! Welcome to Nordhausen, Thuringia. If you've heard that name before, it's probably because it's one of the termini of the Harzer Schmalspurbahn, a narrow gauge network that is one of the last bastions of revenue steam service in the world. And yes, I'd classify this as revenue steam service, not just a tourist railway, because all but one of the routes accepts a Deutschland ticket, the trains stop at 40 different stations, and they are actually classified by many sources as proper regional routes, but that's a topic for another video. Wink nudge. Now, Nordhausen is actually just a little bit smaller than Stade, having a population of just over 40,000 people. Yet, along with having a bigger main station than we do here, and a narrow gauge station, the town also has a 3-line tram network, technically. We'll get to that. Since I'm making this video right after RM Transit announced his retirement, you'll be missed, dude. Let me try my best to go through this network in much the same way I imagine he would. Nordhausen is often called the gateway to the Harz Mountains, and it's easy to see why. The town is rather slopey and also a hub for tourists during certain parts of the year, leading to a combination of seasonal capacity demands and geography that makes a tram line or two just make sense. The network is not very large, with a combined amount of dedicated trackage stretching only 6.2 kilometers. That's the length of roughly 1,287 2023 Ford Mustangs for our American viewers. However, it's also a historic tram system, with the first line opening all the way back in 1900. That's right, as of this year, that's 125 years of continuous tram service. Much like the HSB railway I mentioned earlier, these trams operate on narrow meter gauge track, meaning they can handle tighter curves and trams than, say, Bremen, which use standard gauge tracks. And for those not in the know on what gauge is, that's basically just how much space there is from rail to rail. So in Nordhausen, that's 1,000 millimeters, while in standard gauge, that's 1435. In 1920, the city of Nordhausen actually came into possession of the tramways, the trams to this day actually being operated by the Nordhausen Municipal Works, meaning that the trams truly are being considered a public utility in the same way as water or roads. This doesn't mean that the system hasn't had its issues over the years, though. Being in Thuringia, Nordhausen fell under the control of the DDR, the Communist German Democratic Republic, from the end of World War II until German reunification in the early 1990s. The DDR was actually much better about maintaining city tram lines in a lot of places than their counterparts in the West, a difference that is perhaps best represented by the number of remaining tram lines in East Berlin versus West Berlin. However, that didn't stop the Allentor branch of the Nordhausen tram network being closed down in 1983 due to worsening track conditions that the city just didn't have the resources to fix. I know this video so far has been very tram focused, but I want to interject slightly and say that when I talk about good transit, what is best for your town can depend on a variety of factors. Trams may not even be the best option for you. However, I do think it's a nice place to start thinking about this here. For example, if you live near a major city, perhaps a frequent S-Bahn connection combined with frequent bus service in your town itself may be the best. However, often in smaller towns, and by smaller I mean cities with fewer than 50,000 residents, it seems seems local transport agencies are fine offering infrequent bus services that don't even operate on a regular schedule and nothing more. And that's not a Germany complaint, that's a global complaint. Even if your town is only like 30,000 people, having only infrequent bus service and maybe a train a few times a day kind of sucks. Especially as if you talk to a lot of people who work for the municipalities in these smaller cities, they'll tell you that their goal is to attract new, younger residents while still supporting their, at least in Germany's case, keeping things accessible for the existing older populations. What was that it was once said about Stade? We're not just a retirement community anymore? One of these days, I'm going to also have to talk about the Stade Stadtbahn story and how that later partially led to us being integrated into the Hamburg S-Bahn network. Speaking of Stadtbahns, back to Nordhausen. Nordhausen has 3 tram routes, 2 regular Straßenbahn lines, and 1 tram train Stadtbahn. Tram lines 1 and 10 begin at the Klinikum, where they run parallel with a tram every 10 to 15 minutes at peak. From right after the Stolberger Strasse stop all the way until Nordbrunn, part of line 2, also runs with them, creating peak frequencies across the city center of every few minutes. After Nordbrunn, lines 1 and 10 continue to line 1 terminus at the Bahnhofsplatz, where there is access to both the main station and the narrow gauge station. Fun fact, even though the narrow gauge station is called Nordhausen Nord, it is literally just next door to the main station. Though line 1 terminates at Bahnhofsplatz, its route from Nordbrunn is kind of interesting. Though the rolling stock can be operated in either direction, this part of the route basically forms a giant turning loop around the area, with stops between Nordbrunn and the central stations, the Atrium Passage and Sudhart's Gallery stops, only being operated in one direction. Line 2 meanwhile runs in somewhat of a west-east arc around line 1, starting at Parkallee before joining lines 1 and 10 at Nordbrunn and splitting off past Theaterplatz to serve its eastern branch, fittingly terminating at Nordhausen Ost. Now, I've been hinting at the not just trams thing throughout this video, along with mentioning the HSB meter gauge railway, and that's for a good reason. Line 10 is the newest line in the system, beginning operation in 2004, and unlike the other 2, it actually uses tram trains based on the types you'll see in German cities such as Karlsruhe. Tram trains are basically summed up by that name: lightweight enough to be run on tram networks within cities, but robust enough to code enough to run on mainline tracks, likely to serve smaller areas near the main city cores where transit is needed without further building out tram lines or fully investing into an S-Bahn. Line 10 splits off from Line 1 at the Bahnhofsplatz and actually drives onto the HSB trackage directly next to it. It then operates on an 11.4 kilometer track on the Harzquerbahn to the nearby town of Ilfeld. This is probably one of the craziest transit connections I've seen anywhere in the world because yes, this means that little diesel rail buses, diesel trains, steam trains, and souped up trams are all sharing trackage on this part of the route. It also leads to really good coverage on this route that, at least to me and my few days in the Nordhausen area, seemed really well used by locals. The real technical achievement here, though, is how the tram trains operate after the Bahnhofplatz split, as the HSB line is not electrified. These tram trains are actually dual mode, and if you ride them you'll see a giant lump in the middle of the passenger area which actually contains a full-on diesel motor. Hey, it may not be the most elegant solution, but it works. And clearly the city of Nordhausen itself is also rather happy with Line 10. In 2024, roughly around the 20th anniversary of the opening of Line 10, the city announced plans to potentially build a Line 20, which will parallel part of Line 2 before also turning to join the HSB network just past the Parkallee terminus. And of course, there's also talk of building overhead wires over the part of the HSB route in the Nordhausen district so that trams no longer have to be dual mode, but I'll believe it when I see it. What I'm getting at here is that Nordhausen is a smaller city that not only operates trams and tram trains, but is clearly doing something right with them. And while the city has not always made the best decision with its network, see the 2021 service reductions on lines 1 and 2 from every 10 minutes to every 15, it's still a great network that I actively used a ton while visiting. But now I know inevitably someone will say in the comments, "That's great, Jamie, but I live in a small dwarf that only has like 5,000 people, and all we do for fun is go to the one singular donair shop in town to gossip about which neighbors don't sort their trash correctly. Why should we deserve anything more than 2 buses per day that just go to a nearby, slightly bigger dwarf?" And to that I say, well, first off, you deserve at the very least better bus service. But if you really want trams, then let me point you to the town of Bad Schandau, near the Czech border. A group of tiny towns really, with a combined population of just over 3,400 that has a tram line that goes through said towns and up to a scenic lookout point over a waterfall. Granted, I think they partially get away with this by operating historic rolling stock only, so much like the HSB in Nordhausen and the areas in that part of the Harz, it can be considered a tourist attraction in and of itself. But, also like the HSB, the trams in Bad Schandau accept a Deutschen ticket, so I'll go ahead and call it proper transit. So that's it. Write your local politicians, post on their social media platforms of choice, and do what I do and annoy your family and friends to advocate for better public transit in your area today. And now let's end off this video by answering a viewer question. This was actually asked on a recent short of mine, which by the way, I'm super happy to see these blowing up on here, TikTok and Meta platforms. Yes, I say Meta platforms because I'm even posting them on Boomerbook now. Anyways, the question is, why does everything in German transportation-wise end with Bahn, Autobahn, S-Bahn, U-Bahn, M-Bahn? What does it even mean? Alright, time for a small German language lesson. So, to actually throw in a word from when I was a kid that taught me what this word meant, I spent part of my childhood in Texas, and a very popular water park in Central Texas was Schlitterbahn, literally slippery road. Bahn can mean a path or a road that just gets somewhere. However, it can also be used shorthand for railway. The full term for a railway in German is actually Eisenbahn, a term that I learned when I was a kid and got my hands on some Märklin catalogs, which also taught me the word Model Eisenbahn, literally model railway. I love how German just lets you combine nouns together into big words. However, as much as Germans love big words, they also sometimes want to shorten them for convenience, hence why you see Bahn used for both roads, such as the Autobahn, and for trains, such as the Deutsche Bahn or the Austrian Österreich. Okay, let me try to pronounce this without stuttering. The Austrian Österreichische Bundesbahnen. The ÖBB. German lesson over. This will be on the test. Study up, y'all.
Everybody is watching you.